something. Are we ready? All right, folks, we're going to start. Oh, let me recognize the committee. Folks, we ready? Still morning. Good morning, folks. I want to thank everyone for their presence this morning. The Committee on Appropriations have now been called to order, having established a quorum, more than a quorum. The Vice Chair, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, Councilman Dom, Councilman Heenan, Councilman Thomas, and who am I missing? Councilman O, my apologies, and Councilman, well, Brian O'Neill's not here yet. And of course, I want to recognize the other members of council who are here this morning. In these unprecedented times, I want to thank and start with thanking all of the city workers, our first responders, for their dedication and public service. We want to thank the administration for their response and their work as it relates to responding to this world crisis, and publicly acknowledge and thank all of the leadership teams from the different departments who continue to serve the city every single day. We attempted in this process to create some transparency and an opportunity for a dialogue. The Committee on Appropriations facilitated many discussions with the administration regarding this $85 million appropriation. All of council members were given an opportunity to ask questions. Many of them were answered. There are documents submitted in writing by the administration that will be available for the public clerk's office that specifically outline all of the issues and concerns and the questions asked and the written responses by the administration. It is our hope that, where did you take that over? It is our hope that any other questions not addressed in the written response, if council members want to put those on the record, for those watching us, the administration is not here to physically respond to it, to any additional questions, but for the purposes of the record, we want to make sure that everybody is individually and independently heard and has put any additional concerns other than the ones that were gathered by the Appropriations Committee, submitted in writing, that are going on the record. If there are any additional issues that were not addressed that we want to put on the record, we will allow that now. Hold on a second. Sorry, that would be helpful. So, to formally start this proceedings, I'm going to ask the clerk to read the title of the bill, and then I will call on any of my colleagues who have additional questions that they want to put on the record, and then we will proceed to the meeting. Will the clerk read the title of the bill?
Bill number 200258, an ordinance authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2020 from the Grants Revenue Fund, the Director of Finance provision for other grants, to the General Fund, the Managing Director, and to the General Fund, to certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions.
Are there any questions or concerns by any members of the council that they want to put in the record at this time? The chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I just wanted to say that I'm very relieved to see that Section 3, for those listening, requires beginning April 17th and on a bi-weekly basis thereafter, the Finance Director shall submit to the President and Chief Clerk of Council a report describing in detail the expenditures made or expected to be made by the city in response to COVID-19 pandemic. And this is extremely unusual. We're in an emergency situation, and I think that given those circumstances, we are doing the best we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There was an agreement by the administration that they would work with a subgroup of the Appropriations Committee and leadership to create a criteria for their biweekly reporting as requested by members of council. We will work with them on designing a very simple format that looks at, as we see it, 4 different issues. How are we responding to the health crisis? How are we dealing and working with our workers? How are we supporting our small businesses? And then how are we supporting people? Of the money, how much of it we expect to get federal reimbursements? What are some of the state reimbursements we expect? What will be the match required for the city? And then how do we do additional investment in people? So we will be working on that format. We will share it with all of council for feedback so that we can create a criteria in a format that we can share not only with council members but with the public at large. I want to thank council members who made this a critical part of this appropriations. Anybody else have anything to put on the record? Councilwoman Gauthier.
I asked this in my questions, but I also just want to put on record that I'm very concerned that we aren't doing more thinking about how to support individuals and workers. I know that we are lobbying the state and the federal government, but in the same way that we want to get some cash assistance to small businesses at this time, we should be thinking that way about the individuals and workers that also need assistance. Before this crisis, we were ready to move on a shallow rent subsidy program. We were ready to move potentially on a basic income program. At this time, those tools are needed more than ever, and I think we have to put our heads together around how to get some assistance to individuals quickly.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gauthier. We asked the administration as part of this appropriations process to give us a year-to-date expenditure in our current fiscal year and to outline for us what of the existing programs could potentially be ramped up and prioritized, and we will work with all council around these issues and to begin to address what you're talking about, rental assistance and others. As soon as the administration gives us a year-to-date on all of these line items, we will create a process by which there could be some input and requests and discussion with the administration to prioritize, again, as I said earlier, what are we doing for health, what are we doing for workers, what are we doing for businesses, and then people supports that we can potentially, drivers that we could potentially pull. Thank you, Councilwoman Gauthier. Councilwoman Gim?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to reiterate Councilwoman Gauthier's comments that given what the federal government package may look like, I hope that there will be serious consideration, especially around the business relief package, to ensure that entities or businesses that could qualify under federal loans and other types of things. I know that there's a 3-tier threshold and questions have been raised about the highest tier. Whether there's an opportunity to ensure that our truly small businesses, the ones that don't have lawyers, accountants, CPAs, and others working for them, and are able to potentially qualify for federally backed loans and other types of things, that we can ensure that they have more resources available to them. That includes small landlords, individuals, because we're trying to stave off rent spikes and other types of things that could have long-term damaging effect. Per Councilmember Gauthier's also comments about an importance about UI, we have a number of individuals who just will not qualify for any of the basic checks that will be received. And to the extent that local money can be used to make up for some of that, I think will be one of our top priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gim. There is great concern by council members around the establishment of a three-tier business relief product. I will, for the record, state that PIDC has a loan fund program, and so they have always had a product. Members have expressed concern, as folks will see on this document, around prioritizing small businesses. When we look at national best practices and other cities who are doing small business loan fund programs, cities like Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Birmingham, and others, most of their money, and we're never going to have enough money, but most of their money are really geared to small businesses under $1 million, in some cases under $500,000. We have expressed that concern to the administration as outlined in the memo and the response by Commerce Department that will be made available to the public as part of the record. I agree. I think that with the federal government loan package and the state loan package, there still might be a small group of folks that don't qualify for either that we should be concerned about. The amount of money being requested as part of this allocation is a drop in the bucket, but because it is a drop in the bucket, it should be absolutely focused on those small business, particularly the non-essential businesses that are not open, right? Because at least if you're opened, right, you have some cash flow, but we all know in our commercial corridors and in our neighborhood businesses, there's some folks who don't have access to that. In addition, so we have stressed that. The administration has agreed that the $2 million allocation that is here would only go to small businesses. Over the next week and the next couple of days before this goes to final approval, we will begin a conversation about whether we want more money going into this fund, but it be more targeted. So we welcome council folks putting forth ideas about how they'd like to see that and how much we're willing to support before the final reading. The council president has asked us through the leadership with Majority Leader Councilwoman Parker, Councilman Green from Finance, from Councilman Squilla from Commerce, and me for Appropriations. Please put forward, and Councilman Kenyatta Johnson as a board member to PIDC and a council representative, that we look at this and be more intentional and more focused on small businesses. So this is not the final. And even this appropriation, this emergency appropriation, is really just the beginning as the administration drills down on the federal program and the state business program announced by Governor Wolf yesterday. We could end up being even more intentional and adding additional money just for small businesses. So this is the first hit at this, not the last, and those concerns have been expressed to the administration as outlined in the memo that accompanies their response. There is still some concerns around criteria and who will ultimately evaluate some of these small businesses that we're working through. But we clearly want to send a message to the administration and to our residents in the city of Philadelphia that this is serious, that the city is working very aggressively on the health crisis and understands all of the other factors that are impacting our daily lives. We want to thank people for their cooperation, and we will do our jobs in making sure that all of this is as transparent as possible, but we also want the administration to have the resources it needs to do its job. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to add a couple of items for the record, regarding some of the concerns that I have as well. And one of the first things I would like to know is, from my understanding from our call recently, that the grants required a 25% match from the federal government. And I know that was, or I believe that was waived in New York through the efforts of Governor Cuomo. And so I guess what I'm asking is that an option here? Is that something that the Commonwealth and this, the city is pushing to ensure actually happens? I'd like to get more information in terms of a breakdown of that $85 million and how we're going to be spending it in a little more detail in all categories. Also, a question in terms of can a member of council or a staffer or even more than one staffer be on the application review board. I think that, as a key stakeholder to ensuring that we get money out on the streets, that we get money out into the neighborhoods to our small businesses, it's imperative that council has an opportunity to be a part of the process. And even though we weren't a part of the process as this was being put together initially, moving forward, listen, it's never too late. We still have the opportunity to get engaged, to be a part of what is happening moving forward. And lastly, just in terms of PIDC and commerce and the administration of the funds. One of the questions that I had with the acting commerce director, Sylvie Gauthier at Howard, was how are we making sure that we are including some of the financial institutions that work with small businesses in our neighborhoods, whether it's the Business Center at New Covenant or the Enterprise Center or the West Philadelphia Financial Group or the African American or Hispanic Chambers of Commerce. There are a lot of different entities that could be included. And so how are we working to make sure that they are molded into the fold in the conversation? It's my thought that they should probably have more of a front line involvement in how these funds are going to be distributed, just because they're so on the ground. And I know that PIDC does a lot of work here in the city of Philadelphia. I would like to know how many of the prompt payments to subcontractors they've done over the last 4 years since we enacted that bill 4 years ago, because that's actually a bill that speaks directly to being a lifeline to small businesses that are hanging on by a thread financially. So I'd like to get a number from PIDC in terms of how many of those programs they've actually put into place, as well as how many of these small grants and loans they've done over the years, as well as commerce. So if we could get that information, I think it would be most helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We will relay that to the administration and get you that answer before we do the final voting next week. I guess we could add to that, as the administration outlined in our conference calls, there's already more than $10 million in requests and applications that have come in. We can add to your request a profile of who those businesses are, because that will give us a sense of if we're going to prioritize and if we want to add additional money where the greatest need is. So I will make sure that we get all those answers to all council members before our final vote.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your leadership in this effort, and to also reflect on Councilwoman Gauthier's question in regards to ensuring that we are helping not only our small businesses, but also looking out for individuals, and that is the workers who are at these small businesses. With that being said, I just wanted to note for the record and say publicly a thank you to our intergovernmental partners who we've been communicating with over the past week and a half about this issue regarding what was moving through the Senate. And just for the benefit of Philadelphians who may be watching, you do know that the Senate did pass the bill last night, and this House will be coming back to session on this Friday in efforts to do what we hope will be concur with the bill that was passed by the Senate. And for the record, people have heard about the direct payments that are included, in which direct deposit of up to $1,200 for individuals and $2,400 for married couples, plus an additional $500 per child were included. In addition to that, because this conversation is about small businesses, it included a $350 billion allocation to be spent across the nation for small businesses. Now, we know for a portion of that will go to the states, but we are also expecting through the Community Development Block Grant process here in the city of Philadelphia for dollars to come directly to counties. And we need to give a huge shout out and special thanks to the U.S. Conference of Mayors along with this council, because we communicated and advocated strongly strongly that dollars not only be sent to the state to support and buoy the $100 million program that Governor Wolf proposed, but that we have the flexibility to develop programs here in the city. In addition to that, I wanted to just for a minute give a bit of context for the benefit of the public of how many people have applied for this three-tiered list of support or programs offered to small businesses. There were 1,760 businesses, 1,760 requests, okay, for support. We should just note for the record that 1,093 of that 1,760, those were applications for micro grants. And let me just define for the benefit of the record, because I don't want anyone thinking that this council is about to vote on a bill in which the majority of the funds and the revenue is not going to be geared to micro loans for those that are considered small businesses. Now, micro loans, those are businesses who annual revenue is up to $500,000. It cannot go over $500,000. Those folks would get approximately a $5,000 grant. The next tier would be those between $500,000 and up to $3 million. That would be a straight out $25,000 grant. And the reason why, and the last data that I collected from notes when we had our conference call was that at that time only 47 loan applications had been expected to be issued for those making $3 to $5 million with a zero interest loan. In addition to that, let us also get this on the record. When we think about a loan program, our loan program was zero interest. Zero interest, along with no collateral requirement and no credit score requirement. The Small Business Administration put out a loan program. Guess what the credit score requirements were? 650. Do we know how many barber shops and hair salons and bakeries on our neighborhood commercial quarters would not be able to be eligible for that funding? So with that in mind, Mr. President and Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure we got that on the record so that residents know that the dollars we are voting on today are the micro grants that are going to the majority of small businesses and operating in neighborhoods across the city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for highlighting that, and thank you. And Council President Clark, I know that the team has been working not only with our federal partners, but with our state partners. And even though we're not in council session, everyone is actively advocating, and we appreciate all that work and all the advocacy. And as you said, the strengthening of the relationships with our federal and state partners over this crisis. I think there was a public statement made by Brian Abernathy in the paper today around the unprecedented way that the public and private sector is responding to government during this crisis, and we want to thank all of those folks. I know that there's a lot of angst about everything that's going on. I hope that everybody feels that their input and their concerns are being heard, and that people are doing the best they can to address those. And sometimes decisions have to be made quickly, and we're not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and at the same time maintain our responsibility, our fiscal responsibility to the voters who elect us. So I think this is an and. We can do that, and we can do this, and as Council President Clark says, we can do more. This is only the beginning of, unfortunately, what would be a long process as we, try to reach out to folks. So any other, Councilman, I'll start with Councilman Jones and then Councilman Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your work and detail within the work to try to do the best we can in an emergency appropriation. I'm going to re-emphasize this. Emergency. And I know we gave a lot of attention to small businesses. I've been an advocate for small businesses all my life, but it's not about just them. It is about the firefighter. It is about the policeman, and we heard there are 2 that have been sickened by the virus. It is about the people up in the food cupboards in the prison that are working there risking their lives to make sure that vulnerable populations are secure. It's about the people in the shelters that are dealing with the homeless, that are trying to figure ways to provide more beds. It's about the stock clerk at the grocery store that is doing double time, triple time to make sure that all of us are taken care of. So this emergency appropriation is not perfect. And we'll get a chance, God willing, and with a bite of the apple when we go through a appropriations and budget series of hearings. But today, our job is to make sure we don't leave those first line responders holding the bag. And so I want to shout out, and I'm going to cut it short, the city workers that are doing their damnedest to make sure that this city does not fall apart. It's the sanitation workers that are picking up the trash, it's the bus drivers that are still maintaining, even if it's Saturday and holiday routes, doing their thing, facing the risk of this virus. So what we do today is for them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. I want to thank all my colleagues for working through these issues in very challenging times. I want to thank also Councilmember Parker for putting on the record the numbers of people who have applied, the fact that we have received over $25 million in requests. The vast majority, she stated, which is correct, are going to micro grants. But also, just to let people know and let the audience know and those who are listening, that as the Commerce Department reviews these grants, the priorities will be for businesses that have experienced loss or revenue due to COVID-19, and also focusing specifically on businesses that provide jobs to low-income individuals and are located in zip codes with high poverty. And also focusing on those who are sole proprietorship and independent contractors, giving priority to those who are located in zip codes with high poverty. So this grant program is just one step, as Chair Kiona Sanchez stated. We'll be continuing to work on these issues, but the issues of trying to address poverty and trying to keep these businesses afloat, especially those in our most impoverished areas, are things that have been part of this review, and we'll continue to work on that. And we also need to raise more money, which I know a number of people in this body and others are working on, to try to help all that we can as we get through this crisis. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to reiterate two things. One is that how we work with the people who are now still working. This is a challenge. Councilman Jones had mentioned, it's our grocery store workers, it's our people that are in the coffee shops, it's our firemen and police officers in our transportation. We have to look at, as the city does, to make sure that they are paid a differential. But those folks, too, need to be rewarded for what they're doing and what they're giving to us. And they're taking a chance by going out there and working. And we need to make sure we remember them. And also, as we have these little subsidies that go out there, and the city doesn't have much, but we have to make sure we really take care of the businesses that are taking care of us during these times, and those workers that are putting themselves on the line for us. And I think that's important, and I want to reiterate that we need to do more for them, and as a city, but as a state and the federal government, to look to make sure they are also protected in this. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Thomas. I apologize, I couldn't see your light behind
It's
Councilman
no problem.
Heenan.
We had to do a little maneuvering over
that's
here
why I
to make
said
sure we practicing social distancing. But thank you. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the leadership of the members of council. I just want to, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I just want to communicate my concerns that I had for the record. It starts with the business and the business community. As I communicated on the record, as Councilwoman Parker as well as Councilwoman Bass both communicated as well, we are really concerned about how those businesses will be selected, how we hold those businesses accountable, and ensuring that those dollars matriculate down to the workers. We've seen all across the country in the past when stimulus packages have been passed, people take advantage of these moments. They take opportunities to think about self more than the collective. And in Philadelphia, we've seen way more people think about the collective more than self, but we know that it only takes a few bad apples to spoil the bunch. So I did want to communicate that for the record. I also wanted to echo my colleague, Councilman Jones, and our appreciation for city employees. A big part of why we're here today and what we're looking to do is to let them know that we're here for them, we support them, and we appreciate their work on the ground level. We also need to assure that we remember all employees, those folks who are working in prisons, those healthcare workers who are not getting a fair wage. We want to make sure that those folks get an opportunity to get the fair wage that other city employees are getting, even if they're not directly contracted through the city of Philadelphia. Outside of that, thinking about healthcare workers and thinking about the next tier of this, we want to make sure that supplies for our healthcare workers and the things that they need to do the work on the ground level, as well as first responders and city employees, are included in packages that we put together moving forward. And we also want to think about our young people. We're moving into a space and a place where cyber education is becoming more and more of an option for our young people to essentially exercise, and we recognize that the school district of Philadelphia right now is stuck between a rock and a hard place. So as we think about what this next tier of support looks like, I want to make sure that we're thinking about our children, specifically our teenagers. I know they're struggling significantly right now as it relates to staying in the house and not being able to socialize, and it's natural when you look at human growth and development for teenagers to feel like they're invincible and this isn't really going to hit them. And the reality is we know that this can impact anybody at any given time, whether it's you directly or you being a carrier impacting somebody else. So with that being said, again, I want to thank you, Councilwoman, for your leadership, as well as the rest of the leaders on City Council who helped us navigate through this process, especially me, this being my first time on the Appropriations Committee. And thank you to Council by leading by example. If you look at everybody around, you could tell we've been in quarantine. We haven't been to the beauty shops and the barber salons. The gray hairs are showing. The gray hairs are showing. So thank you for your leadership and thank you for leading by example.
The pressure. Thank you. I had to do my hair last night. And before, if no one else has, Councilman Kenyatta, I was going to recognize you anyway, but go ahead.
Sure.
Councilman Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I just want to thank you for your leadership and really making sure that this process is transparent, and most importantly, that we're fighting on behalf of those who are most in need. And we are in a state of crisis right now. And when I think about the daycare centers and I think about the barbershops and the beauty salons, those small businesses, those mom and pop businesses are the bedrock of the city here in the city of Philadelphia. And so I know this is the beginning of the process. I know from the leadership standpoint, Council President, as well as our majority leader and our whip, has been working with elected officials on the state level as well as the federal level, and we need to get everybody inside the same room. I'm one of those individuals that believe, from an intergovernmental standpoint, now is the time, from a leadership standpoint, specifically if you're on the state level, on the fate level, to put skin in the game. Now is the time to bring back to the city of Philadelphia the resources for those who are most vulnerable. There's only so much that we can do on the city level, and we're going to always protect the ball. We always have done that as members of council, but it's most important now that you get everybody on the same page, advocating with one voice, because we're in some there's individuals, and I thank God every day when I wake up in the morning, because there's individuals right now who don't know how they're going to pay their rent, who don't know how they're going to pay their mortgage. And just for the record, just because we're holding off on evictions doesn't mean you still don't have to pay your rent, for the record. And so if you're not working, right, and you're 2-3 months behind, depending on how long this virus stays around and how long we're quarantined as a city, you still have to pay your bills, right? And so it's important that we're speaking with one voice on the city, state, and federal level, and specifically when it comes to the resources that are here, that we're protecting, we're making sure that they go to the workers and the businesses that are keeping this city afloat. I just wanted to say that for the record, and we'll stay on top of this case to make sure that we're helping those most in need. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I want to thank you also and recognize the hard work and what your team did around the employees at the stadiums. I want to thank you for your leadership in that. I know Councilwoman Ginn was also very active around some of the restaurants, Councilwoman Gauthier, dealing with some of the issues at University of Penn. You know, everybody is really trying to step up and want to be very, very intentional in helping those workers. So all of you, Councilman Thomas mentioned the issue of we can't let some of our businesses and our partners hide behind subcontractors. You know, this is the time when we need them to use their clout and their leverage for those workers. So I know all of you have been working on this actively, and I want to thank you, for all of you, for that leadership is important. Like I said, this is, as Councilman Jones alluded to, this is an emergency. This is the beginning of what will be, as those of us who were here in 2009 and 10 during the recession, it took us almost that entire 4-year cycle to navigate and balance out those interests. And I have no doubt that we will do that under our leadership team to navigate through this. With that being said, if there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to recognize our vice chair. I'm going to move from the public hearing to the public meeting, and I'm going to recognize our vice chair, Councilman Johnson, for an amendment on Bill 200258. The copy of the amendment has been circulated.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I offer an amendment to Bill number 200258. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of this committee. I move that the amendment to Bill number 200258 be approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any oppositions? Seeing none, the amendment to Bill number 200258 has been moved. I will now recognize Vice Chairman Johnson for a motion on the amended bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Bill number 200258 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any oppositions? The bill has been moved out of this committee with the bill number 200258 as amended will be moved out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and with a rule suspension to allow first reading of this bill at our next session, which will be within 10 minutes, so nobody leave, as we go into our council session. For the record, as we close up, I want folks to know that the Education Committee will be having an emergency meeting with the school district tomorrow. That members of the Education Committee have received it. We've asked members to give us questions ahead of time, so similar to this, we can have written responses from the school district, and I want to thank everyone for their participation, and stay safe. With that, this concludes the hearing and the meeting of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Please.